I still remember the first time I met Robert, my future father-in-law. Sarah had warned me he could be particular. What she didn't prepare me for was the way his eyes swept over me like I was something unpleasant he'd stepped in. I was 25, fresh out of college, working 2 jobs to make ends meet while building what would become my first business. To Robert, I was just another broke kid chasing his daughter. "So, what exactly do you do?" he asked during that first dinner, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension that comes from old money. When I explained my small tech startup, he actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a full belly laugh that made Sarah's mother shift uncomfortably in her chair. "Tech startup," he repeated, like I'd told him I was a professional unicorn trainer. "Everyone thinks they're the next Bill Gates these days." That set the tone for the next 8 years of my relationship with Sarah. Robert never missed an opportunity to remind me that I wasn't good enough for his daughter. At family gatherings, he'd introduce me as Sarah's friend, or simply avoid introducing me altogether. He'd ask Sarah about her job, her health, her happiness. But when his eyes landed on me, it was like looking through glass. I didn't exist. The worst part wasn't the obvious disdain. It was the subtle ways he tried to undermine our relationship. He'd plan father-daughter trips without mentioning them to me, then act surprised when Sarah brought me up. He'd give Sarah expensive gifts while pointedly ignoring my presence. Or worse, he'd hand her cash for whatever she needs, while staring directly at me. The implication crystal clear. When Sarah and I got engaged, Robert's reaction was telling. No congratulations, no welcome to the family. Just a long sigh and the words, "Well, I suppose if this is what makes you happy." At our wedding, he walked Sarah down the aisle with the expression of a man attending a funeral. During his father of the bride speech, he managed to talk for 10 minutes about Sarah without mentioning my name once. But it was the everyday moments that cut the deepest. Holiday dinners where there would somehow be one chair too few, and I'd end up eating at the kitchen counter. Family photos where I'd be cropped out later. Business conversations where he'd dismiss my opinions before I'd finish speaking, then turn to ask the waiter the exact same question. Sarah tried to defend me, but Robert had perfected the art of plausible deniability. "I didn't mean anything by it," he'd say with that practiced innocence that fooled everyone but me. What Robert didn't know was that while he was busy looking down on me, I was quietly building something that would change both our lives forever. Every dismissive comment, every rolled eye, every time he made me feel small, just fueled my determination to prove him wrong. But I had no intention of proving anything to him directly. I was going to let success speak for itself. The breaking point came during Sarah's 30th birthday party. Robert had insisted on hosting it at his country club, the kind of place where membership was passed down through generations, along with the casual racism and classism. I should have seen it coming when he mentioned the dinner reservation was for 12 people, not 13. "There seems to be some confusion about the seating," the maître d' explained when we arrived. "The reservation is for the immediate family only." I watched Robert's face, waiting for him to correct the misunderstanding. Instead, he adjusted his cufflinks and avoided my eyes. "I'm sure there's been a mistake," Sarah said, her voice tight with embarrassment. "My husband is immediate family." Robert finally spoke, his voice carrying that patrician authority he wielded like a weapon. "Perhaps it would be best if, well, there's a lovely bar area where you could wait." He gestured vaguely toward the lounge, like he was directing me to the servants' quarters. "The birthday girl should be surrounded by family tonight." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Sarah's face went white, then red. Her mother stared at her plate. Uncle Richard suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. I felt that familiar burn in my chest. The same feeling I'd had as a kid when bigger kids would knock my lunch tray out of my hands. But I wasn't that powerless kid anymore. "You know what, Robert?" I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "You're absolutely right. Family should stick together." I kissed Sarah's cheek and whispered, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Enjoy dinner with your family." I walked out of that country club with my head high, but inside, I was screaming. 30 years old, successful by any reasonable measure, and this man still had the power to make me feel like nothing. I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands shaking with fury and humiliation. Sarah came running out 20 minutes later, tears streaming down her face. But the damage was done. That night, Sarah cried herself to sleep, apologizing for her father. He's from a different generation, she kept saying. But I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at myself for still caring what Robert thought, for still letting him get under my skin after all these years. As I lay there listening to Sarah's breathing finally even out, I made a decision. I was done trying to win Robert's approval. I was done playing by his rules, done accepting his scraps of tolerance. From now on, I would focus on what I could control. My business, my success, my future. If Robert wanted to treat me like I was invisible, fine. But there would come a day when he wouldn't be able to ignore me anymore. I just had no idea how spectacular that day would be, or how publicly Robert would have to eat his words. The months following Sarah's birthday disaster were a turning point for me, though not in the way anyone expected. While Robert continued his campaign of subtle disrespect, I threw myself into work with an intensity that surprised even me. Every closed door in my face became fuel for the fire burning inside me. Every time he introduced me as Sarah's husband in that dismissive tone, I worked another late night. Every family gathering where I felt like an outsider pushed me harder toward success. What Robert didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my little tech startup was exploding. 3 years earlier, I'd developed a revolutionary logistics software that major corporations were now fighting over. While Robert saw a struggling entrepreneur barely keeping his head above water, I was quietly signing contracts worth millions. The kid he'd laughed at for having dreams bigger than his bank account now employed over 200 people. The irony wasn't lost on me. Robert worked as a senior partner at a prestigious law firm, the kind of place where they still used leather-bound appointment books and measured success in billable hours. He made good money, lived in a beautiful house, sent his kids to private schools. In his mind, that made him successful. What he didn't realize was that my company's quarterly revenue now exceeded his annual salary by a factor of 10. But the money wasn't even the best part. The best part was the recognition that was starting to come with it. Industry magazines were writing profiles. Business schools were asking me to guest lecture. The mayor had personally called to congratulate me on bringing jobs to the city. I was being invited to speak at conferences alongside CEOs whose names Robert would recognize. Yet I kept quiet about it all. Part of me wanted to throw my success in his face, to show him exactly how wrong he'd been about me. But a bigger part of me knew that the sweetest revenge would be letting him discover it on his own terms, in his own time, when he couldn't dismiss it or diminish it. The hardest part was watching how his treatment affected Sarah. She'd started making excuses for why we couldn't attend family functions. "Dad's been stressed at work," she'd say. Or, "Maybe it's better if we just do a quick visit." She was trying to protect both of us, but it was tearing her apart. She'd grown up as Daddy's little girl, and watching him treat her husband like dirt was breaking her heart. During those quiet moments between us, Sarah would ask if I was okay, if Robert's behavior was getting to me. I'd tell her I was fine, that his opinion didn't matter anymore. And it was true, mostly. I'd learned to armor myself against his slights. But deep down, there was still that hurt kid who just wanted to be accepted, who wondered what it would take for Robert to see me as worthy of his daughter. I was about to find out. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports. "Mr. Harrison, this is Janet Mills from the Chamber of Commerce. I have some exciting news." My assistant had screened the call, but something in her voice made me take it immediately. "We're pleased to inform you that you've been selected as this year's recipient of the Entrepreneur of the Year Award. The ceremony is next month at the Grand Ballroom, and we're expecting over 500 of the city's business leaders to attend." I sat in stunned silence for a moment. Entrepreneur of the Year, the same award that had gone to tech giants, real estate moguls, manufacturing pioneers. The same award Robert mentioned every time it was announced, usually with some comment about real business people getting the recognition they deserved. "Mr. Harrison, are you there?" "Yes, sorry, this is incredible news." "Thank you. The ceremony is black tie, of course. You'll be allowed to invite up to 10 guests for your table. We'll need their names by next week for the programs." 10 guests. I thought immediately of Sarah, my parents, my business partners. Then, a strange thought crept in. The Chamber of Commerce ceremony was the social event of the year for the city's elite. Robert's law firm always bought a table. He'd mentioned attending in previous years, complained about the food, criticized the choice of venue. He would definitely be there. That evening, I told Sarah about the award. She screamed, literally screamed with joy, and threw her arms around me. "I'm so proud of you," she kept saying. "This is incredible. We have to tell everyone." But I asked her to wait. "Let's keep it between us for now. I want it to be a surprise." She looked puzzled but agreed. What I didn't tell her was that I was already imagining Robert's face when they called my name on stage. All those years of condescension, all those dismissive looks, all those moments when he made me feel like I wasn't good enough for his daughter. They were about to collide with reality in the most public way possible. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into preparing for the ceremony. I had a custom tuxedo made, practiced my acceptance speech until I could deliver it without notes. Most importantly, I researched who else would be attending. Robert's law firm had indeed purchased their usual table. He'd be sitting no more than 50 feet from the stage when they announced my name. The night before the ceremony, Sarah asked again if she could tell her family about the award. "They should know," she said. "Dad especially. This might change how he sees you." I shook my head. "Tomorrow night everyone will know. Let's just let it be a surprise. If you're watching this and you've ever felt underestimated by someone you desperately wanted to respect you, you know what I was feeling. Sometimes the universe has a perfect sense of timing, and after 8 years of being invisible to Robert, I was about to become impossible to ignore. The morning of the ceremony, I woke up with a strange mix of nerves and anticipation. Sarah was already up, trying on different dresses, completely unaware that this wasn't just another business dinner we were attending. "You seem different today," she said, catching my reflection in her mirror. "Excited about something." I was excited, in a way that felt both thrilling and slightly terrifying. I'd spent weeks imagining this moment, but now that it was hours away, the reality was setting in. In a few hours, Robert would discover exactly who I really was. There would be no more dismissing me as Sarah's struggling husband. No more treating me like an unwelcome guest at family gatherings. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet Mills. "Looking forward to tonight. Your table is reserved in the front section. The program looks fantastic." I smiled, thinking about how Robert always complained about being seated in the back with the nobodies at these events. I spent the afternoon at the office trying to focus on work but constantly checking my watch. My business partner Mike stopped by around 3. "You ready for tonight, Mr. Entrepreneur of the Year?" He'd been one of the few people who knew about the award in advance. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, though I keep wondering if I should have told Sarah's family beforehand. Mike laughed. "Are you kidding? This is going to be legendary. Her father's been treating you like garbage for years, and now he gets to find out you're being honored as the city's top entrepreneur in front of 500 people? That's not revenge, that's poetry." At 5 o'clock, I headed home to get ready. Sarah was doing her makeup when I walked into the bathroom. "You know, I've been thinking," she said, applying mascara. "Maybe we should stop by my parents' table tonight just to say hello. Dad mentioned that his firm always goes to these chamber events." My heart skipped a beat. "He'll be there?" "Probably. You don't mind, do you? I know things have been tense, but maybe in a neutral setting." She turned to look at me directly. "I just want him to see you the way I see you. Successful, driven, accomplished." I kissed her forehead. "He will," I said. "Tonight, he definitely will." By 7 o'clock, we were dressed and ready. Sarah looked stunning in a navy blue gown that complemented her eyes. I'd chosen a classic black tuxedo, nothing flashy, just elegant and confident. As we drove to the grand ballroom, Sarah chattered about the other couples we might see, the business leaders who would be there, how proud she was to be attending such a prestigious event with me. I listened, nodding and smiling, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about that first dinner 8 years ago, when Robert laughed at my tech startup. I was thinking about the birthday party, where he wouldn't let me sit at the family table. I was thinking about every time he'd made me feel small, Tonight, the tables would finally turn. The grand ballroom was everything I'd expected. Crystal chandeliers, round tables draped in white linen, the city's elite mingling with champagne glasses and practiced smiles. Sarah squeezed my arm as we walked in. "This is incredible," she whispered. "I had no idea these chamber events were so fancy." I spotted Robert immediately. He was holding court at a table near the center of the room, surrounded by his law partners and their wives, gesturing with his cocktail as he told what was undoubtedly a self-aggrandizing story. He wore his success like cologne, heavy and obvious. When he saw us approaching, his expression shifted to that familiar mask of polite tolerance. "Sarah, darling." He kissed his daughter's cheek, then his eyes flicked to me with barely concealed annoyance. "I didn't expect to see you two here. These tickets are quite expensive." Sarah laughed, missing the insult entirely. "We're so excited to be here. The atmosphere is amazing." Robert's wife, Patricia, smiled warmly at Sarah but gave me the same lukewarm nod she'd perfected over 8 years. "How lovely that you could make it," she said, the subtext clear. "How surprising that you could afford it." "Yes, well," Robert said, adjusting his bow tie. "These events are really for the serious business community. Established companies, you understand. Not everyone gets invited." He said it like he was explaining why children couldn't sit at the adults' table. Before I could respond, the lights dimmed, and Janet Mills took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're about to begin this evening's program." Robert barely glanced at us as he returned to his table. Sarah and I made our way to the front section, and I watched his eyebrows raise slightly when he noticed how close to the stage we were seated. "Good seats," Sarah commented. "You must have gotten lucky with the assignment." The evening progressed through the usual Chamber of Commerce routine. Welcome speeches, sponsor acknowledgements, recognition of various business achievements. I noticed Robert checking his watch several times, clearly bored. He'd probably attended dozens of these events over the years, always as an observer, never as someone being honored. Then Janet Mills returned to the podium for the final award of the evening. Our Entrepreneur of the Year award recognizes an individual who has demonstrated exceptional innovation, leadership, and community impact through their business ventures. I felt Sarah's hand slip into mine. Around us, the room had grown quiet with anticipation. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. This year's recipient has built a company from the ground up, created hundreds of jobs, and revolutionized logistics technology for major corporations across the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating this year's Entrepreneur of the Year. The pause stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could see Robert at his table, politely attentive but clearly ready for this to be over so he could get back to networking. Mr. David Harrison. The sound of my name echoing through the ballroom felt surreal, like hearing it in a dream. Sarah's gasp beside me was audible even over the thunderous applause that erupted from 500 people. But it was Robert's face that I'll remember for the rest of my life. His cocktail glass stopped halfway to his lips. His mouth literally fell open. For the first time in 8 years, Robert Morrison was completely speechless. I watched as the color drained from his face, then returned in a wave of red that started at his collar and worked its way up to his receding hairline. "That's my husband!" Sarah screamed, jumping to her feet, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That's my husband!" She was shaking with excitement, pride, and probably shock. Later, she would tell me she'd never been so surprised and proud in her entire life. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and began walking toward the stage. The spotlight found me immediately, and suddenly I was aware of every eye in the room following my movement. But my focus was on Robert's table. He was still frozen in place, his law partners looking between him and me with expressions of dawning understanding. I could hear whispers rippling through the crowd. "That's David Harrison? The logistics software guy? His company is worth millions." I had no idea he was so young. As I reached the stage and shook Janet Mills's hand, I glanced back at Robert's table. Patricia had her hand over her mouth in shock. His partner, Stevens, was leaning over to whisper something in Robert's ear, probably explaining exactly who I was and what my company did. But Robert just sat there, staring at me like I was a ghost. The applause continued as Janet handed me the Crystal Award. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, Mr. Harrison's company, Harrison Logistics Solutions, has grown from a 2-person startup to an industry leader employing over 300 people and serving Fortune 500 companies across North America. 300 people. I caught Robert's eye as Janet spoke. He now knew that the struggling entrepreneur he'd dismissed for 8 years employed more people than his entire law firm. The broke kid chasing his daughter had built something he could never have imagined. When the applause finally died down, I stepped to the microphone. My acceptance speech was brief but heartfelt. I talked about taking risks, believing in yourself when others don't, and the importance of surrounding yourself with people who see your potential even when you can't see it yourself. I thanked Sarah for her unwavering support, my team for their dedication, and the business community for this incredible honor. What I didn't need to say, was that sometimes the people who doubt you the most become the greatest motivation for your success. As I walked off the stage to another standing ovation, I saw Robert slowly getting to his feet, his hands coming together in mechanical applause, his face still a mask of shock, and something that looked suspiciously like embarrassment. The aftermath of the ceremony was a whirlwind of congratulations, business cards, and handshakes. Sarah hadn't left my side, beaming with pride and introducing me to everyone as my brilliant husband, the entrepreneur of the year. But I kept one eye on Robert's table throughout the evening, watching as the reality of who I was slowly sank in. He finally approached us near the end of the evening, when the crowd had thinned and most people were heading home. His usual confident stride was replaced by something more hesitant, uncertain. Patricia was with him, looking embarrassed and apologetic. "David," he said, and it was the first time in 8 years he'd used my first name. Congratulations. This is quite an achievement." Sarah looked between us, sensing the weight of the moment. "Dad, can you believe it? David never said a word about being nominated. I had no idea." Robert cleared his throat. "Yes, well, it seems there's a lot I didn't know." He looked directly at me for the first time all evening. "Perhaps we could have lunch sometime this week? I'd like to hear more about your company." There it was. The olive branch I'd dreamed about for years. The acceptance I'd craved, finally being offered. But something had shifted in me during those moments on stage. Standing there, holding that award, seeing the respect in 500 pairs of eyes, I realized I no longer needed Robert's approval. "I appreciate that, Robert," I said calmly. "But I think 8 years of lunch invitations have come and gone, don't you think?" His face flushed again. "Now, David, I know we've had our differences, but..." "Differences?" I interrupted. "Is that what we're calling it? When you wouldn't let me sit at your daughter's birthday dinner, when you introduced me as Sarah's friend for 3 years after we got married, when you've spent nearly a decade making it clear that I wasn't good enough for your family." Sarah's eyes widened. She knew about individual incidents, but hearing them listed like that, she was finally seeing the pattern for what it was. "I was protecting my daughter," Robert said defensively. Any father would get to know the man his daughter loved," I replied. "Any father would see that she was happy and respect her choice. You didn't protect Sarah, Robert. You hurt her by rejecting someone she cared about." The truth hung in the air between us. Patricia touched Robert's arm gently. "We should go," she said quietly. Before they left, Robert turned back once more. "I was wrong," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I was wrong about you." "Yes," I agreed. "You were. But the difference is, I don't need you to be right about me anymore." As they walked away, Sarah slipped her arm through mine. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Not just for the award, for standing up for yourself, for standing up for us." For the first time in 8 years, I felt truly free. Driving home that night, Sarah was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "How long have you been successful like this? I mean, really successful?" I thought about how to answer. The business has been growing steadily for about 4 years, but tonight wasn't about proving anything to your father, Sarah. It was about finally realizing I didn't need to. She nodded, understanding. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I'm sorry for all the times I asked you to just be patient with him, to give him more time. I thought he'd come around eventually." You were trying to protect both of us, I told her. That's what love does. The weeks following the ceremony brought changes I hadn't expected. Robert called twice, wanting to meet for coffee or dinner. I declined both times, politely but firmly. When he showed up at my office unannounced, asking to discuss business opportunities, I had my assistant explain that I wasn't available. It wasn't about punishment or revenge anymore. It was about boundaries. For 8 years, I'd allowed Robert to define my worth, to make me feel like I needed to earn a place at his table. But success had taught me something more valuable than money or recognition. I didn't need a seat at any table where I wasn't welcomed as an equal from the beginning. Sarah struggled with this at first. She wanted us to reconcile, to become the family she'd always dreamed of. But gradually, she began to see that healthy relationships can't be built on a foundation of previous disrespect. Real respect isn't something you can demand after the fact. It's something you give freely or not at all. 6 months later, at Sarah's birthday party, we celebrated at our house with friends who'd supported us through everything. Robert and Patricia were invited, but declined to attend. Previous engagement was the excuse. We had a wonderful time without them. The most beautiful part of this whole experience wasn't the public vindication or the award sitting on my office shelf. It was the peace that came from finally understanding that your worth isn't determined by those who can't see it. Some people will never give you the respect you deserve, and that's okay. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone else's inability to see it. If you've ever dealt with family members who make you feel small, who dismiss your dreams, who treat you like you're not good enough, remember this: their opinion of you is not the truth about you. Keep building, keep growing, keep believing in yourself even when they don't. Sometimes the sweetest victory isn't proving them wrong. It's reaching a point where their opinion simply doesn't matter anymore. Your worth was never up for debate. The right people will see it from the beginning, and those are the ones who deserve a seat at your table. Thank you for watching Coffee with Revenge. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves respect, regardless of their current circumstances, and subscribe for more stories of justice and growth. Your support means everything.